So this is pretty wild. We have seen 6 Bitcoin ETF applications in just as many days. 6 applications in 6 days. Bitcoins and altcoins are pumping as a response. It's been pretty positive. There's BlackRock, Fidelity, Invesco, WisdomTree, Valkyrie, and Bitwise. Those are the firms behind those 6 applications. And by the way, all of these Bitcoin ETF filings are very exciting, but just keep in mind that none have been approved yet. They're all applications. But that being said, they've still triggered a lot of enthusiasm and a little rally here, which has been nice. So obviously questions are going to arise such as, is this the start of the next Bitcoin bull rally? Are altcoins going to suffer in the long term despite the positivity that a Bitcoin ETF may bring to BTC? And is it possible that this level of institutionalization could even ruin Bitcoin? Could a Bitcoin ETF ruin Bitcoin? Welcome to the channel. My name is Maddie and this is Altcoin Buzz. Best of luck if you choose to invest, but guys, I am not a financial or investment advisor. And so this video is definitely not financial or investment advice. And just so we're all on the same page, a Bitcoin ETF has the goal of creating a simple and legally compliant way to trade the price of Bitcoin. And going back in time a little bit to October 19th, 2021, that was the launch of the first US-listed Bitcoin ETF. And as expected, it was hit. And then, as you may remember, within just 48 hours of launch, the Bitcoin ETF became the fastest ETF ever to hit $1 billion in AUM, assets under management. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't great because what followed subsequently was a major market slide. That was kind of the end of the bull run in the bull market. Some would say that this triggered the end of the bull market, and that was the end of the first ETF. In fact, SEC, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, had rejected dozens of Bitcoin ETF applications. And the question then comes up, why are 6 major financial players suddenly FOMOing into BTC ETFs? The reason is actually BlackRock. They are the world's largest asset manager with over $9 trillion in assets under management, and they applied officially for the BTC ETF for the first time ever. Now, a historical examination reveals intricate dynamics between the Securities and Exchange Commission and BlackRock. Looking at them historically, BlackRock has a 99.86% success rate. And that specifically is in terms of getting ETFs approved. So out of 576 ETF applications, 575 were approved. Only once was a proposed ETF rejected by the SEC, and that happened in 2014, but only once. So what exactly is an ETF? It's an investment vehicle that is publicly traded, kind of like a stock, but it tracks the performance of an underlying asset. And in the case of a Bitcoin ETF, yes, the underlying asset would be BTC. So a BTC ETF will provide investors a way to gain exposure to the value of Bitcoin without worrying about any legal complications. So check this out. A Bitcoin ETF works in much the same way as any other ETF, right? Investors buy shares in the ETF through whatever brokerage they use to buy stocks, and then can trade them the same way they trade shares, maybe in Apple, Tesla, whatever. And Bitcoin ETFs track the current price of Bitcoin and should act in lockstep with Bitcoin's price swings. Okay, so that's an ETF, but what is the need exactly for a Bitcoin ETF? Why don't investors just buy Bitcoin? Well, look, for more regular retail investors, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general still look pretty risky. Besides having unclear regulations around them, owning Bitcoin requires keeping a Bitcoin wallet and trusting crypto exchanges, which, at least for many, are still uncharted territory for people that are unfamiliar with the space and maybe require a certain level of self-education. It's not for everybody, and that's something that I think we have to acknowledge. Holding Bitcoin places a burden of security squarely on you. That's an additional detail to keep in mind, and that makes you responsible for keeping your own private keys safe, unless, of course, you entrust them to an exchange, but that's not advised. If you keep your own private keys, this may mean buying a hardware wallet to purchase Bitcoin or storing private keys in a secure manner. And by the way, you're also going to have to work out how to file taxes for sales of Bitcoin that resulted in capital gains. With a Bitcoin ETF, however, investors need not worry about private keys, storage, security. They own shares in the ETF just like their shares of stock and can gain exposure to the crypto market without having to go through the hoops of purchasing and holding crypto. So it's kind of like a proxy to crypto. And really, to put it plainly, that's an extremely appealing proposition for all kinds of regular people, as well as sophisticated institutional investors. Okay, so BlackRock officially filed with the SEC on Thursday to launch a Bitcoin spot ETF. And this would be the first Bitcoin spot ETF in the US. And it would also allow investors to get exposure to Bitcoin without actually buying it, as we just discussed. And BlackRock is proposing to use two parameters to hold the Bitcoin and cash for the ETF: Coinbase Custody and BNY Mellon. The custodial arm of Coinbase is the Bitcoin custodian, and it will hold all the Bitcoin to back the ETF. And the Bank of New York Mellon is the cash custodian, and it will hold the investor's cash. The SEC has been hesitant to approve Bitcoin ETFs in the past. That's due to concerns about the ability of large whales to manipulate Bitcoin's price and market manipulation in general. But with BlackRock, they're addressing these concerns by proposing to only use the top Bitcoin exchanges and by entering into a surveillance sharing agreement with NASDAQ. Assuming it stands a chance, when exactly will the Bitcoin ETF be approved? So the SEC is expected to take several months to review the filing, which means that the price will continue to perhaps rally between now and then. I feel that yes, we could see some light upside movement as BlackRock Bitcoin spot ETF. That's going to be a major milestone for the crypto industry in general. It would make it easier for investors to get exposure to Bitcoin. It's going to mean more people in the space, more mass adoption, if only indirectly. And it could help in certain cases, at least in terms of perception, to legitimize the crypto industry in general. Can BlackRock succeed? Well, Grayscale's spot ETF proposal was rejected last year because it tried to form a surveillance sharing agreement with the CME Bitcoin futures market, which the SEC did not consider closely related enough to the spot Bitcoin market. Grayscale has since sued the SEC, and judges overseeing the case have expressed skepticism over the SEC's argument. BlackRock said it would determine the value of the Bitcoin in its trust each day with reference to the CF Benchmarks Index. The index tracks the price of Bitcoin across Coinbase, Bitstamp, IBIT, Kraken, Gemini, and LMAX Digital and strives for, quote, resistance to manipulation while not including, quote, any futures prices in its methodology. Now, many hedge funds and other investment firms have filed applications with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for Bitcoin ETFs in the past, but we've seen 6 Bitcoin ETF applications most recently in just 6 days. Again, from BlackRock, Fidelity, Invesco, WisdomTree, Valkyrie, and Bitstamp. And now, really, the SEC is facing a fresh wave of spot Bitcoin ETF applications from major investment firms in the wake of BlackRock's filing. Taking a look at those 6 here. So ETF provider WisdomTree, they resubmitted an application request regulatory approval for the launch of the WisdomTree Bitcoin Trust on Tuesday, June 20th. And the watchdog has previously rejected WisdomTree's attempts to release a Bitcoin ETF. They cited possible risks for consumers, such as fraud and market manipulation, but they're trying it again. Then we have Invesco, and Eric Balkunas announced on his Twitter account that Invesco has renewed its efforts to launch a Bitcoin ETF in the United States. The company's first filing was in 2021. That's when it partnered with Galaxy Digital. Now, Invesco was initially interested in launching a Bitcoin futures ETF. However, it did abandon those plans toward the end of 2021. And instead, it's focusing on a product that enables customers to invest in the primary cryptocurrency based on its actual market price. Financial services firm Valkyrie Digital Assets updated its filing for the Valkyrie Bitcoin Fund on Wednesday with the Securities and Exchange Commission, a fresh prospectus reflecting today's dominant crypto narrative. And Fidelity Investments is also rumored to be entering the Bitcoin ETF space soon. Other than filing for an ETF, it is being said it can buy Grayscale investments. We've been seeing the continued outflows among exchange-traded products, mutual funds, and over-the-counter trust OTCs because of the crackdown on crypto markets by high-profile SEC lawsuits against Coinbase and Binance that really labeled a whole bunch of altcoins as securities. We've been covering this. In total, investors have pulled $423 million in funds over the past 9 weeks, and people have been feeling kind of out of the ordinary when the world's most prestigious financial institution applies for a cryptocurrency investment product during a tough regulatory crackdown. CoinShares attributed the comparative trickle of outflows to BlackRock's Bitcoin exchange-traded product, Gambit. Senior ETF analyst Eric Balkunis said this on Twitter, defending the use of the ETF label. He said it was the real deal, and he also pointed out that BlackRock has a nearly undefeated record when it comes to the SEC. Again, 575 wins out of 576 attempts. Remember that in contrast, other BTC ETF applicants over the last few years cannot say the same. Asset managers VanEck, ARK Invest, and Bitwise have all been rejected by the SEC. And the issue is actually so contentious that Grayscale Investments even sued the SEC after it was rejected for converting its Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, GBTC, to an ETF. BlackRock, of course, is a serious institution, and the Bank of New York Mellon would be the custodian for the trust's cash holdings, another pretty reputable establishment. And so the current regulatory environment may prove difficult to manage an ETF, but the Wall Street giant doesn't just play around and certainly has the best odds yet. What are some of the potential impacts when we consider the price of Bitcoin? Well, first of all, Bitcoin market dominance has reached 50% for the first time in about 2 years due to BlackRock's actions. And Bitcoin climbed to $30,000 for the first time since April, really buoyed by BlackRock's announcement. And the rally is backed by institutional demand this time, which is kind of a nice feeling. BlackRock's ETF is expected to be around $5 billion, and this is certainly going to be the world's most anticipated ETF pretty much ever. In terms of the upcoming Bitcoin halving, think about that for a second, because the launch of the ETF could also coincide with the halving, which is an event that occurs every 4 years when the reward for mining a block of Bitcoin is halved. So this could lead to further increase the price of BTC, as the halving will reduce the supply of new Bitcoin that is being mined. And institutional adoption is another thing to consider, because the approval, potentially, of BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF could increase institutional adoption. Pretty much that's a certainty, which would provide a regulated and secure avenue for investors to access Bitcoin. Also, Grayscale's Bitcoin Investment Trust, GBTC, is currently enjoying some attention from investors, to put it mildly, and its trading volume is actually a testament to this. The GBTC trading volume has spiked by over 400% within just the last week. And as of June 14th, the daily trading volume of GBTC was still trading at about $16 million, but within 5 days, so that is 5 days later following the BlackRock announcement, that same GBTC volume surged massively to about $80 million. And in this case, Grayscale itself can be optimistic about its proposal to convert GBTC into a spot Bitcoin ETF. Although Grayscale, like many others, has had its proposal previously rejected by the SEC. Also, there are rumors that started earlier this week that claims Fidelity might be planning to acquire Grayscale. And if that turns out to be the case, then that helps GBTC's cause with the SEC, especially with regard to Fidelity's reputation, really as an old traditional firm, established, of course. So look, whatever the case may be ultimately, there is generally a sense of optimism right now surrounding the BlackRock ETF proposal for Bitcoin. And in a way, it's kind of a nod to the legitimacy of this space after so much turmoil that was caused, the drama between the SEC and Binance and Coinbase. But if a BlackRock Bitcoin ETF is approved, it's going to be a good omen for the industry, whether you're a fan of the institutionalization or not.